Something was seriously wrong in Barcelona. Lewis Hamilton didn't just finish behind cars he usually outpaces. He radioed in with a quiet kind of panic. The car felt off. Not just a little twitchy or stiff, he called it the worst he'd ever driven. But what if the issue wasn't just bad luck? What if Ferrari knew something was wrong and told their drivers to stay silent? Because that's exactly what's unraveling now. Behind the scenes at Maranello, an issue buried deep in the SF-25 setup may have sabotaged both Hamilton and Charles Leclerc during the Spanish Grand Prix. And while the team insists it's being fixed, there's one strange catch. Both drivers have been told to keep their mouths shut. But why? Why would Ferrari want to hide it? What exactly went wrong? And most importantly, could this be the moment that cracks start to show in the Ferrari-Hamilton alliance? What you're about to hear has never been revealed in full until now. This is the inside story of how one mysterious issue nearly broke the most iconic team in Formula One, and how it's forcing Lewis Hamilton to fight not just the car, but the silence around him. It started as a whisper, something in the telemetry, something the engineers couldn't quite place. During the Spanish Grand Prix, both Ferraris looked slow. But Lewis Hamilton's car was more than just off-pace. It was unpredictable, unstable, almost undrivable. In the closing laps of the race, Hamilton, already struggling, was overtaken by a Sauber driven by Nico Hülkenberg. That moment alone sent shockwaves through the paddock. Hamilton doesn't get passed by midfield cars. Not like that. Not this late in a race. Immediately after the checkered flag, Hamilton's voice came across the radio, tight and serious. He said the car felt like something was deeply wrong. Not just a bad setup or poor grip. Something was broken. What makes it worse? He had felt it all race long. The car didn't want to rotate properly. Balance was completely off. He didn't have confidence in the rear. It wasn't behaving like the SF-25 he had been testing all year. It was alien. The problem? Nobody had told him there was a known issue, because Ferrari hadn't found it yet. And as the team began digging into the data after the race, what they uncovered validated every word Hamilton had said. It wasn't just one car, it was both. Charles Leclerc had been quietly suffering through the same symptoms, but there was a problem much bigger than poor race pace, and it was about to become a very tightly controlled secret. After the race, Ferrari engineers rushed to investigate. Something had gone deeply wrong, and they needed answers fast. What they found stunned them. Both SF-25 cars had been carrying a setup anomaly that massively impacted performance, starting from the middle of the race onward. Sources inside Ferrari haven't disclosed the exact details, but it's understood the issue had to do with aero balance degradation over race distance, possibly linked to a mechanical or floor component failing under heat. Whatever it was, it caused the cars to lose their balance window, leaving both drivers wrestling with unpredictable handling. Lewis Hamilton described it later as a relief when he was told the car truly was broken. Because for a driver of his caliber, having a race that bad without explanation can start to chip away at confidence. But here's where things get strange. When asked about the issue ahead of the Canadian Grand Prix, Hamilton said he wasn't allowed to give details. Ferrari had explicitly told both him and Leclerc not to speak publicly about what went wrong in Spain. That silence raised eyebrows. Why muzzle your drivers when transparency could build trust with fans and media? Unless, of course, the problem wasn't just technical, but political. At a time when the team is under scrutiny for its performance and internal hierarchy, the last thing Ferrari wanted was a public admission that their prized cars had failed both drivers in the same race. What's most shocking is how early Hamilton realised something was off, and how long it took for the team to believe him. From lap 20 onwards, he had been voicing concern about balance, instability, and inconsistent rear grip. But there was little urgency in the responses he received over the radio. It wasn't until after the race, during TV interviews, that he finally got confirmation from the engineering team that he hadn't just imagined it. That gap between driver instinct and team recognition is dangerous in Formula One, especially at Ferrari, where communication between Hamilton and his race engineer, Riccardo Adami, is still developing. In fact, some insiders now believe the team's delayed response to Hamilton's feedback exposed deeper problems: hesitation, miscommunication, or perhaps even mistrust between driver and garage. At Mercedes, Hamilton's concerns would have triggered immediate cross-checks. At Ferrari, it took a full race and a post-race debrief to admit the car had failed him. Hamilton's tone after the discovery was measured. He didn't lash out. He didn't blame anyone. But beneath his words was something heavier, a hint that this wasn't just a one-off issue. It was a pattern beginning to emerge. And when patterns emerge in a team like Ferrari, they tend to have consequences that reach far beyond the racetrack. While much of the media focused on Hamilton, Charles Leclerc was dealing with the exact same nightmare, only quieter. From the outside, Leclerc's Spanish Grand Prix looked uneventful. But behind the wheel, he was battling the same invisible enemy, a car that refused to cooperate. No front grip, sudden rear steps, and no consistency from corner to corner. Yet unlike Hamilton, Leclerc didn't vent on the radio. He kept his frustration internal. That silence may have been mistaken for calm until Ferrari revealed that both cars suffered the same issue. Why didn't Leclerc say more? Because, like Hamilton, he had been instructed to say less. In a pre-race media session ahead of Canada, Hamilton admitted the team told both drivers not to talk too much about what had happened. Leclerc, ever the company man, complied without protest. This kind of top-down control is nothing new at Ferrari, but it's risky. When drivers aren't allowed to speak openly about car issues, it builds pressure behind the scenes. Pressure that doesn't disappear. It just builds until it explodes. Leclerc may not be showing that pressure yet, but for a driver in his 6th season at Ferrari, still chasing his first title, watching his new teammates struggle with the same hidden flaws sends a chilling message. No one is safe from the machine, even when the machine is broken. And now, heading into Canada, both drivers are hoping the team finally found and fixed the gremlin before it shows its face again. When Lewis Hamilton says something is the worst he's ever experienced, people listen. And after 21 seasons and 7 world championships, it takes a lot to earn that label. Yet that's exactly how Hamilton described the SF-25 during the Spanish Grand Prix, a car so unbalanced, so out of sync with his inputs, that he genuinely questioned whether it was broken. From the cockpit, every turn felt like guesswork. He described it later as the most prolonged period of instability he'd ever endured in a race, with no warning and no solution. The car's behaviour changed corner by corner, lap by lap, and by the halfway point, he felt like a passenger rather than a driver. Even after the race, Hamilton wasn't sure if the issue was real or just his perception, until the engineers confirmed it wasn't in his head. That moment brought a strange kind of relief. He hadn't lost his edge. The car had lost its way. But it also raised a painful question. Why did it take so long for someone to believe him? And if it happened once, could it happen again? Behind closed doors, the real problem may be even bigger than a one-race glitch. Ferrari's 2025 Challenger, the SF-25, is notoriously hard to set up. Drivers have repeatedly said the car has a narrow sweet spot, a narrow performance window where it behaves properly and delivers grip and balance. Outside that range, it becomes unpredictable. Teams like Red Bull and McLaren have managed to create flexible cars that adapt to different track conditions and tyre wear, but Ferrari's design has been more temperamental. That's what makes setup so critical, and why Hamilton's post-race comments in Spain carry extra weight. In Montreal, he hinted at disagreements with Ferrari's engineering staff. He explained that they were trying setups that made no sense based on his 18 years of experience. Changes were being made that clashed with what he'd learned at Mercedes and previous successful runs at the same circuits. In his words, he had to say, "Hold on a second, that doesn't make sense." That disconnect between Hamilton's instincts and Ferrari's methodology may be the biggest hurdle of all, because even with talent and speed, if the setup logic doesn't align, the car will never perform consistently. And that's the gap Ferrari must close if they want Hamilton to thrive. Now, all eyes turn to Montreal, a track where Lewis Hamilton is more than just competitive, he's legendary. With 7 victories at the Circuit Gilles Villeneuve, he's tied for the most wins at the Canadian Grand Prix in history. It's a place that feels like a second home, where he often finds rhythm and confidence. And yet, heading into this weekend, the stakes feel higher than ever. Ferrari desperately needs a clean race. Hamilton needs reassurance that the car can work with him, not against him. And Charles Leclerc needs to show that Spain was an outlier, not the start of a technical downward spiral. Publicly, Hamilton insists he isn't searching for a breakthrough weekend. He claims the outside noise is louder than the reality inside the team. But the body language says more than words. This isn't just another race. It's a test of whether Ferrari can respond to pressure with clarity, precision, and results. Because if Montreal reveals another failure, technical or strategic, the questions around Ferrari's direction won't just be whispers in the paddock. They'll become thunder. Here's where it gets strange. Despite confirming internally that something went wrong in Spain, Ferrari hasn't released any public explanation of what failed. No technical bulletin, no team statement, no apology. And that silence speaks volumes. In Formula One, transparency can build trust, or its absence can fuel speculation. Teams like Mercedes have often issued detailed breakdowns when issues occur, both to inform fans and to control the narrative. But Ferrari's response was the opposite: clamp down, keep quiet, and issue vague reassurances. That decision may have been made to protect reputations inside the garage, or to avoid triggering criticism of internal processes. But it also sent a different message to the drivers: don't speak unless spoken to. For Hamilton, who built a decade-long legacy at Mercedes on honesty, openness, and teamwork, that culture shift could prove difficult to accept. And if silence continues to outweigh clarity, it risks turning technical struggles into political ones, where engineers, drivers, and leadership are all walking on eggshells rather than building towards solutions. Because at Ferrari, what's unsaid often matters more than what's announced. What happened in Barcelona wasn't just a one-off disaster, it was a warning. A warning that Ferrari's most valuable asset, Lewis Hamilton, is already sensing cracks in the foundation. When a seven-time world champion describes his car as the worst he's ever driven, and is told not to talk about it, something is clearly broken beyond mechanics. The issue may have been fixed in the garage, but the trust lost in that moment will take longer to repair. Hamilton knows how to win. He knows how to build a team around him. But for that to work at Ferrari, he needs more than speed. He needs belief, communication, and the freedom to shape the car in his image. That process has begun, but it's running against old habits and stubborn systems. Montreal offers a reset, but it's also a spotlight. If Ferrari delivers, the momentum could swing back in their favour. If not, the whispers of frustration will grow louder. And so will the doubts about whether this iconic pairing can survive the very pressure it was meant to conquer. The real race isn't just for points. It's for control, chemistry, and the soul of Ferrari's 2025 season.